Welcome to the Good Book Club podcast, where we make all our book club meetings and bonus events available for listeners to enjoy. This episode features a Lazy Learner event with Dr. Knight Lundwall of the Utah Cultural Astronomy Project. His presentation tonight was titled Cultural Astronomy of the Ancient Fremont, and we delved into the mysterious rock art of the Fremont people and its relationship to the sun and solstice. There is so much more meaning in this rock art when you understand how it relates to the sun and the seasons. Dr. Lundwall's research is expansive and fascinating, and we only scratch the surface of what there is to learn about the mysterious Fremont rock art. We'll definitely be having Dr. Lundwall back again for more exploration. We hope you enjoy learning more about this fascinating topic. This Lazy Learner episode was taped on Tuesday, April 11th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time.
Welcome, everybody, to the Good Book Club. It's Tuesday night, April 11th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, and we are here for another wonderful Lazy Learner presentation. These are bonus meetings that we have with our book club, not necessarily connected to a book, where we learn something new and we have an amazing guest on to talk to us. And tonight we are going to be discussing the cultural astronomy of the ancient Fremont with the wonderful and amazing Dr. Knight Lundwall. So we are so excited to have him here tonight. I'm going to read his bio very quickly, and then we will get right into it. This is going to be an amazing topic tonight. So John Lundwall holds a doctorate in comparative myth and religious studies from Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara, California, where he teaches as adjunct faculty. He has served on the editorial board for Cosmos and Logos, Journal of Myth, Religion, and Folklore, and is a founding board member of the Utah Valley Astronomy Club, a 501c3 organization that partners with state and national parks to run their astronomy and related programs. He is also the project manager of the Utah Cultural Astronomy Project and teams with a group of researchers, archaeologists, rock art specialists, and photographers to record and protect Native American rock art sites in Utah. He is an author of several articles, and his latest book, Mythos and Cosmos, Mind and Meaning in the Oral Age. We are thrilled to have John here. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. All right. Well, I'm just going to jump right in. All right. You can see me? See my screen?
Yeah, you need to go into presentation mode. There you go.
All right. Here we are. All right. I'm just going to, 45 minutes is not a huge amount of time, so I'm going to get right into what we do. Just a real quick introduction to the Utah Cultural Astronomy Project. We are a group of researchers here in Utah. My research partner is a registered archaeologist with the state of Utah, John McHugh. We work with the Utah Rock Art Research Association with field guides and rock art specialists, surveyors, photographers. And we just survey rock art panels. We've published in the American Indian Rock Art Journal, Archaeoastronomy and Ancient Technologies. That's an archaeoastronomy journal out of Europe. We give presentations to the Utah state parks, and we help state parks in Utah register for international dark sky status. Actually, Utah has more IDA, International Dark Sky registrations, than anywhere else in the world. Most people don't know that, but Southern Utah is a dark sky mecca, at least it currently is. So not only do we do professional publications, but we also appear in pop culture publications. This is a 2-page spread, a major article that was published in Ancient Origins. That's that's the Graham Hancock Ancient Aliens crowd, as well as archaeology. But we find that when we publish in there, we get 10,000 people reading our stuff instead of 10. And so we do YouTube podcasts and pop culture presentations as well. We've presented at Salt Lake, FanX, Comic-Con, etc. All right, archaeoastronomy and rock art really began in the 1970s in a place called Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. And here's a picture of the canyon I took a few days before summer solstice a few years back. There's this gorgeous butte. It's called Fajada Butte. And it lights up. It's the first thing that lights up in the canyon during the summer months. And so there it is. And it just so happens that built on top of this butte is I've got a picture right here, are these three stones leaning against this rock face. And underneath those three stones are a couple petroglyphs of spirals. And it was in 1978, I think, a woman named Anna Sofer was hiking the butte, and she looked underneath the stones just when a solar interaction was happening at summer solstice. One of these light daggers through the cracks of these rocks goes right through the center of that spiral. And she recognized it for what it was. I mean, she thought that cannot be accidental. And interestingly enough, she's not an archaeologist. She's not an anthropologist. She's an artist. And it was her eyes as an artist that really understood what was going on there. So she gathered a team of people, and they slowly began surveying Chaco Canyon, which is really the largest archaeological site in North America. And sure enough, summer solstice, you get a sun dagger that goes through the center of that spiral. On the equinox, these sun daggers frame the spiral, one on each side. And winter solstice, the daggers equidistance between the center and the circumference. And so that has calendric purposes, but as we get into the rock art of Utah, I'm going to talk about how we believe the calendric purposes of the solar interaction on the rock art is secondary, if not tertiary. The primary thing they were doing was cosmicizing the image. They were bringing it to life by wetting it with the power of the sun and bringing the power of the sun into the tribe, into the group. And so that was the primary purpose of this. Anyway, these are some black and whites I took at Chaco Canyon. Over the next 20 years, she and a team of scholars began surveying Chaco Canyon. It has huge pueblos. I mean, one of the pueblos there, Pueblo Bonito, has 800 to 1,000 rooms. It was the biggest building in North America until, the very late 1800s, when Chicago began building apartment buildings. So, but they also discovered that windows, doors, and walls were astronomically aligned to both solar and lunar cycles. And so the entire site is astronomically aligned. And that brings me to 2017. I was right here in Clear Creek Canyon. It's 30 minutes outside of Richfield. And I was actually down there. It's a park, Fremont Indian State Park. I was down there running a star party for them, helping them register for international dark skies status. And I was running star parties at night, and during the day, hiking the trails with my son, looking at petroglyphs. To be honest, that's only 6 years ago. I didn't know anything about the Fremont. I didn't know anything about their petroglyphs. My area of study is in ancient orality, cosmology, mythology, and religion, not in Native American indigenous peoples of Utah. But it so happens that, just a quick introduction, we're going to be talking about the Fremont culture. And the Fremont were an indigenous group living in Utah between 300 CE to 1300 CE. That early date 300 can actually be pushed back 200, 100, even perhaps even into the BCEs. The problem is it's hard to define exactly what is Fremont the earlier we go back. But basically, the Fremont inhabited all of present-day Utah during that 1,000-year span, but it's not a homogeneous culture group. You've got different tribes, probably speaking different languages, different motifs in the rock art in different areas of the state. However, there does seem to be a common iconography and ideological basis. In any case, we identify the Fremont culture complex by 4 identifying markers. They're right here on your screen. Top left, they do have unique rock art. Their bodies in their rock art are trapezoidal. They have wide shoulders, narrower hips, and so you get these trapezoidal bodies. If you see those in rock art in the American Southwest, invariably it's Fremont, and invariably you find that mostly in Utah. They inhabited parts of Colorado, Nevada, Wyoming, Idaho, Four Corners region, but primarily in Utah. They wore moccasins. The Puebloans wore sandals. So they wore moccasins made out of deer hide. They lived in pit houses. These structures here, about a 3 or 4 foot hole dug in the ground with posts and adobe lattice work around. And they produced a grayware pottery, a very plain kind of pottery. And so it's these material artifacts, remains that archaeologists look at and say, this is Fremont culture. We don't know what they called themselves. They're called the Fremont because one of the first excavations of this culture group was by the Fremont River, which was named after John C. Fremont, a European explorer who went through the area, and the river was named after him. So the Fremont Indian is named after a European explorer. So that's how they get that name. We have no idea what they called themselves. Well, while I was in Clear Creek Canyon, Fremont Indian State Park, I walked up to this petroglyph during the day. It's about 4.5 feet long and 2.5 feet tall. And of course, what you're looking at is a giant phallus. But there's 3,600 rock art images in Clear Creek Canyon, just in the canyon itself. And most of them are anthropomorphs. There's a lot of, birds, bird feet, bear feet, deer, elk. And then again, a lot of anthropomorphs or humanoid figures. Many of them are probably deities. And so when I walked up to this panel, it was different. And when I first walked up to it, I didn't see it as a phallus. I just saw a big geometric design. It took me a few minutes looking at it to realize, oh yeah, that definitely is a phallus. But I walked up to it just at the right moment because this was happening. Hopefully you can see my mouse, but there is a triangle of light that moves up from the ground. It starts from the ground. It's created by a little shelf of rock, which is right above image. And as the sun goes overhead this panel, that shelf of rock puts a shadow over the entire panel. And then as the sun moves westward, a little divot in that shelf causes a triangle shaft of light to rise up from the ground up through the wheel motif. And what happens is the tip of that sun shaft, there's 4 cupules, actually 3 cupules that they've pecked into the stone. And then this right here is not a cupule. I'm going to go back. These are pecked in using a rock. And that's quite large. That's the size of maybe a $50 or a silver dollar. Well, I'll tell you exactly how large it is. It's 1.3 inches in diameter. There's these couple cupules here, and that right there is a hole. It's not a cupule. And when I first looked at it, I thought it was just a rock had fallen out of the rock face and wasn't part of the design. But as I watched the triangle of light move up, the tip of it at summer solstice touches this cupule, the right one, comes up, touches the middle one, and then ends at this drilled hole. And so when I saw that, I looked, and sure enough, this hole up here is drilled with a bone or a stick. It's not natural, it's man-made. And so they carved these 4 cupules or holes through that wheel motif. And this triangle of light goes up through it through the month of summer solstice. And that happens for about an hour during the day. And so had I been there an hour earlier, the entire panel would have been in shadow. An hour later, the entire panel would have been in sunlight. I wouldn't have seen a thing. I just happened to walk up right when this triangle of light was moving up through the center. And, you know, all my sirens started going off because I thought, well, that could be a solar interaction. It sure looks convincing to me. So when I got back, I actually went to the BYU library. The BYU archaeology department is the one who excavated this canyon. And so I read their reports just to see if they had recorded anything, and no one had recorded anything about any solar interactions with any of the rock art. And so I called my friend John McHugh, who's an archaeologist in Utah, specializing in the Southwest. And I said, hey, come down to this park and watch this with me. And he said he would. So we went down, and next thing you know, we started the Utah Cultural Astronomy Project. Well, it took me a couple years to figure everything that was going on with this panel, mostly because, you know, I had a learning curve of how to run time-lapse photography equipment. And then I'd go down there and it would be cloudy, and that wasn't helpful. So it took me a while to get everything recorded. But you can see here, there's actually an anatomically correct phallus up here. It's ejaculating. You got 2 phallic men standing on top of these row of 37 counting dots, an upside down corn tassel. And so there's all these elements. It's a fertility motif. And it turns out that it uses the sunlight during the entire agricultural cycle, from equinox to summer solstice, back to fall equinox, spring equinox to summer solstice, back to fall equinox. This triangle of light actually swings back and forth on this panel, and it catches, there's a cupule here, so halfway between equinox and solstice, the tip of the shaft touches this left cupule. There's actually a cupule right here, and on equinox, the shaft is all the way over to the left and comes up, and it goes through laterally. So I would show you time lapse, but I'm going to show you several other pieces. One of the things that was curious to us is this drilled hole. Why are these packed and this one drilled? And it took us a few months for me to think, well, maybe they stuck something in that drilled hole. And so, you know, if you find drilled holes in these petroglyphs, let me just say, don't stick things in them. We use special materials to stick them in. We try not to degrade any of the rock surface, but I put a stick in there to see what would happen with the shadow of the stick through the year, thinking that might be also a calendar implement. But as I did it, I realized as I was sitting there watching it all day, if you put a stick in there, the first thing that lights up on the rock face is the tip of the stick, because that's sticking out from the rock face. And that's when it hit me. They're probably not using that as a shadow stick at all. Rather, they're putting a prayer stick in it. And the tip of the stick lights up first. And if you put a prayer feather, a prayer bead at the top of the tip of that stick, and it illuminates while the rest of the panel begins doing its thing with these sun shaft going through it, you have now just cosmicized that feather and bead. If you take that feather and bead and you put it in your ritual paraphernalia, your costume, your drum, whatever you're using, you now take possession of the power of the sun. And so here's another hole, by the way. This panel has several drilled holes on it. And so we realized that actually during ritual days, it would have been fully decorated. There would have been prayer feathers, beads, turkey feathers, eagle feathers, colors. It would have been decorated while the sun was doing its thing on the panel. All right, this is Five Finger Ridge. I'm just going to shoot through this so that we can get to some more of the rock art alignments. But this is the largest excavation of Fremont that has ever been done. It's in Clear Creek Canyon. It had about 100 structures on it, but many of them were not being dwelt in, and many of them were storage structures. The peak population of this site was between 70 and 100 people. Of course, they're semi-nomadic, so we don't exactly know how it looked. There could have been groups that lived here full-time and other groups that came and went as they would go and do their annual pilgrimage as they hunted, gathered, and traded. There are several pieces found at this site that link it to many other sites around the American Southwest. So there's an active trade network that is going on. There's seashells from the Pacific coast found here. There's turquoise from Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico found here. And so it's not just some, group of people that are detached from everyone else. There are trade routes, and which means ideas are being traded as well. And so anyway, one of the first things we did in Clear Creek Canyon, the canyon runs east-west. It's about 3 miles long, which means that there's a north side of the canyon and a south side of the canyon. And as we went through the archaeology, we realized that all the petroglyphs were carved on one side of the canyon, on the north side. And this really shocked us because there's plenty of rock face on the south side. So we spent a couple days just driving and hiking the south side, looking for any rock imagery on those panels. And besides a cave shelter, which has pictographs in it, paintings, a petroglyph is carved, a pictograph is painted. There are some pictographs on the south side, but no petroglyphs, nothing carved on the south side. They're all on the north side. And so that got us thinking, why would they do that? And so we began recording the azimuth reading of each panel. We would stand in front of it and just take a sighting compass and mark what direction it faced, the image itself. And we discovered that in Clear Creek Canyon, about 99% of the rock art faces southwards. This is not accidental. This is a methodology. And we realized that they're orienting all their rock art south, not all of it, but 99% of it. And of course, we theorized then they're orienting it towards the sun. In northern latitudes, the sun is declinated south. And so when the sunlight touches it, it breathes life into the image. The ethnography shows that they probably believe that the images of the rock art were living, breathing beings. And what better way to make something come alive than to align it with a sun shaft, for example. And of course, they could have done the same thing with the light of the full moon. There's probably lunar petroglyphs there that we don't know because we don't live there, and that would require years of study to work that out. But bottom line is, as we extended our research beyond Clear Creek Canyon, we continue to record the azimuth readings. And, there's hundreds of thousands of images in Utah, and we've only surveyed, we've only looked at a couple thousand images. So this is a small sampling. But so far, over 90% of the rock art we have looked at face southwards throughout the state. So this is very promising that they are orienting much of their rock art southwards towards the sun. It's a form of sun riding. Of course, that makes northward facing rock art really interesting to us. I have a whole video with some north facing rock art with the Big Dipper carved in it. So there you go. Before I move on, for Fremont Indian State Park is an international dark sky. This is a shot of the Milky Way I took there. It's a single exposure, non-photoshopped. It's a 15, 16 second exposure. So it gathers more light than the eye can see, but the skies down there are gorgeous. Here's another shot of a rock that we are surveying. with the Milky Way and the stars. So if you get a chance, the skies in southern Utah are spectacular. One last panel in Fremont Indian State Park. This is a big panel, heavily vandalized. Much of the rock art is heavily vandalized, but this also performs through the year. Hopefully you can see my mouse, but you have this big 12-ring spiral with a square sheep, a spiral coming out of its back. At summer solstice, there's this little guy with two feathers pointing to the right there. The sun shadow line moves down this rock face as the sun moves from east to west. And that sun shadow line goes right between his feathers, touches the edge of the spiral, and bisects the spiral coming out of the sheep. That's not accidental. During equinox, it does the same, but it splits these two spirals. Whoops, I didn't mean to click that. At winter solstice, you got to be standing right at the panel, because as soon as the sun breaches the horizon, this column of light appears as if someone flipped a light switch. And the sun shadow line is bracketing the right side of that spiral and separates the spiral and the horn. So they're using this sun shadow line as their template to create the size, position, and proportion of those rock art images on the rock face. And then they watch how that sun shadow line changes through the year, because the angle of the sun changes through the year. And they are creating these images on the rock face to catch that sun shadow line at significant moments of the year. I will show examples of that coming up. All right. We're moving miles away from Clear Creek Canyon. This is in the Uinta Basin, northeast Utah, by Dinosaur National Monument, Vernal. And we were invited up there by a couple of rock art specialists who said, hey, we've got a couple really interesting sites that we want you to look at. So a couple of years ago, John McHugh and I went up there with our equipment, and sure enough, we were blown away with the sites that are up there, especially this guy right here. He is unique to the Uinta Basin. He has this unique headdress, these two oar-like shapes. We call him the Oreheaded Figure because these protrusions coming out of his bucket cap look like oars to us. And he has this inverted bucket cap. And so we call him the Oreheaded Figure. This guy right here is a pictograph painted. He's about 3 feet tall, painted on top of older petroglyphs. And some of these petroglyphs are pre-Fremont. In fact, there's some really faded ones. They probably go into the BCEs, which means this rock face had been used for centuries, and the Fremont acquired it and painted over it. But there are some really interesting things about this guy. One, he has this fringe staff that's an extension of his arm, and it's curved. This fringe staff is quite a common motif in rock art. It's a rain staff used in rain rituals, amongst other things. But we had never seen a rain staff that was really the arm of the individual curved like that. And we thought that was unusual. And of course, if you look here, his left leg is short and stubby, and then his right leg is 3 or 4 times the length of his left leg. We thought that was unusual. Anyway, but rock art is by nature unusual. We just looked at that. But here is a 3-minute time lapse of summer solstice, how the sun interacts on this rock face. No. All right. There's no sound, so I'm just going to talk over it. But you have to be there at 6 a.m. This is a wide shot where I'm getting the entire. On the other side to the right off image is another side to this gulch. And there's a little V-shaped wedge in it that the sunlight spills through, and it creates this, as it comes down, this little dip in the sunlight. And as that moves down, as the sun rises, the sunlight perfectly fills the headdress of this figure. Boom, right there. And so we thought that was significant because that's pretty unequivocal. But as it goes down, it wraps his curved staff, and that's why the staff is curved. And when that happened, we realized, no, this is a sun marker. They're using this sun shadow line as the template to paint this figure. We have a headdress alignment and a staff alignment. And then if you wait another 20 minutes, he stands over this lump of shadow. And that's why one leg is 3-4 times as long as the other. And so here's a close-up. My white balance is off because my camera's in the dark and the sunlight comes in. So next time I go there, I have to fix that because that gets really bright. But here comes the sunlight. And I'm just going to fast forward it a little bit. This is a 10-to-1 ratio. So it's 10 times quicker in this video than in real life. But you can see that sunlight is literally filling his headdress. Now, it took us a little while, but it turns out this guy is a headhunter. And then we realized what's happening here is the sun is taking his head. And so the image is being cosmicized by the power of the sun at summer solstice right there, taking the power of his head. So here we have at summer solstice, the sunlight filling his headdress perfectly, then wrapping that curved staff, and then he stands on the shadow line. And so again, this is another example of the sun shadow line being used as the template to place the size proportion placement of that pictograph. Now, we actually photographed this site for 30 days before the summer solstice. That gives us 60 days of data, 30 days before the solstice. That data is the same as 30 days after the solstice. And then, of course, we also photographed it at equinoxes, winter solstice, cross quarter days. So basically through the year, this alignment only happens at the summer solstice. In fact, 7 days of the year is all that happens. 4 days before the solstice, that alignment does not occur. The light is shifted way to the left. So that is a very tight alignment, and that does tell us that this is an alignment. They've painted that figure to catch that moment of sunlight in that time of year. Well, that got us really excited. So we asked our field guys, take us to any site that has this headdress figure, this oreheaded figure. So we went to this next site, which is a really unusual rock feature. It's a giant sandstone boulder that has fractured. The bottom quarter here is fractured and then fallen over. I've got a picture of the piece that's fallen over right here in front, which means you can stand underneath that rock. Well, and not only is it fractured and fallen over, but the boulder itself is split in two. So you can stand behind it and look through the crevice. But also you can stand underneath that spur of rock, and it juts out to a dip in the opposing horizon right there. And it just so happens underneath this spur of rock is our oreheaded figure. There he is. Now he's different. He's a different stylized, but there are his oars. His eyes are shown there, and his bucket is really just indicated by 2 parallel dots over his eyes. And interestingly enough, this is a petroglyph that is carved over older pictographs. That's the same culture that pecked the petroglyphs on that previous rock panel. So they're reusing the site. The site has been used for centuries, probably as a solar observation site. And they've pecked their oreheaded figure right here. And so we looked at summer solstice at the sun shadow line. But of course, that's not what this site is. This is a horizon viewing shrine. And so let me show you, I've got a time-lapse camera under the rock spur. And if you sit there and watch the sun, I'm going to fast forward it. Yes, it got cloudy as I was there, but it's still, the sun comes down from the zenith and it actually descends into the west, following the left side of the rock spur. It just hugs it if you're standing right under that. So that's a really interesting phenomenon to watch. You can see the time lapse as that is happening. But what that means is the summer solstice sunset is going to come right down and set in the notch right underneath this rock spur, right in front of where that oreheaded figure is placed. And so in the previous panel, that was a solar interaction on the rock face. On this panel, you're actually looking at the horizon. And there is summer solstice sunset in that notch with a nice solar flash. And of course, there's a still shot of it. It's really quite spectacular. And so they were using this as a solar observation shrine for centuries. Again, pre-Fremont was using this site because of the unusual geology. There's the sunset from behind the crack. And interestingly enough, there is a sun shadow line on that figure. It bisects his face, and that shadow doesn't move during that entire phenomenon. And so generally, just because of the angle of the sunlight and of that rock spur, you get this block of shadow that stays there for a couple hours and barely budges. And so while that's not unequivocal, that was interesting to us, but the horizon viewing part of that is an unequivocal solar viewing shrine. All right, my time is running up. I'm going to give you one more figure, and sure enough, here we found this guy, and he is the oreheaded figure, but his oars are pointing straight down. When we first looked at him, we thought, yeah, that might just be earbobs. That might not be the oreheaded figure. But about 50 feet away from him, you have this sun warrior, and there's the oreheaded figure who's touching him. The sun warrior is holding this. That's actually a scalp. It looks like a mushroom, but it's a head. And this is a headhunter figure. And very often the oreheaded figure has those two oars sticking up, but he also has a hole in his bucket. And there it is indicated in right there. And so, but he had this really large tri-spiral on his chest. And we thought that was interesting. And sure enough, we just discovered this on accident. One of our group members, Tina, watched it happen and started shouting to everyone. And by the time I got all my camera equipment there, it was all over. So I had to go the next day. And then we've been filming it for a couple of years. But we're going to watch how this works with a video with some music, because, you know, why not? There it is, high up on the rock face. Has that unique, here's a close-up of that tri-spiral in his chest. There's his headdress with that fissure or sipepu in his headdress. Again, this is a 10:1 frame rate. That's the summer solstice shaft. Again, happens 7 days of the year. And you can just watch how the sun works. Shaft goes right up and it touches right where the inner line meets the circumference, which is on purpose. Then the tip of that sun dagger bends and fills in the center of the spiral. Boom. And then the tip of that follows the inner line and then ascends to follow the circumference. just real quick, that, by the way, is 3 sites of about 5 that has that oreheaded figure that has solar interactions. Clearly, that's a solar deity that the Fremont were using, and they were capturing the sunlight on those panels. So why do that? Again, we don't believe they're using that as a calendar. They didn't have the same conception of a calendar that we have. To them, time and place are very important, of course. But what they're really doing is bringing down the power, in this case, of the summer solstice sun into the image itself. So they have these a series of summer solstice rituals that the sun priest will do. And of course, there's no writing with the Fremont, so we don't know exactly what they were doing. We researched this by reading the ethnography of the later Puebloan tribes, the Hopi, the Zuni, the Tewa. We read the ethnography of the Navajo and the Apache because there's influence of Athabascans in the vernal area as well. And so we see what their sun priests have done, and then we look at the rock art and the solar interactions and sort of make analogical hypotheses that this was being done here. It's a pretty good hypothesis to make. And so we know that they're bringing down the power of the sun into the image, which in turn is bringing it into their ritual, which in turn is bringing it into their agricultural cycle, their biological cycle, their ritual initiation, tribal initiation cycle. It's bringing the power of the cosmos down into their ritual. So that's the primary purpose of why they're doing that. Now, of course, in the American Southwest, these high desert valleys where they're growing maize, actually in the vernal area, they did irrigate. They dug irrigation canals in many of their fields, but in many of the places they just dry garden. They dig a deep hole and plant the maize with some, other things, animal guts or whatever, and then they let it grow with no watering whatsoever. And so at the summer solstice becomes a very important time to start performing your rain rituals, which they did. And so, that rain stick is there on purpose. From the heat of the summer solstice on, late June, July, August, they're performing their rain rituals to bring the rain to get the crop to finish. And so that, by the way, is why he's a headhunter, because headhunting was associated with rain making and rain bringing. I'm not going to get into that. So the primary purpose then of these solar interactions on the rock art is to cosmicize the rock image, to bring the image to life, to bring the power of the cosmos into the tribe, and to cosmicize the ritual. So that's the primary purpose. The secondary purpose is, sure enough, that happens at summer solstice, which they're tracking. So it is a calendric, it does have a calendric use. That's my 50 minutes. So let's just open that. That's all I could do more, but I'm just showing the solar interactions of some of these panels, how they work, and so let's open it up to Q&A.
Yeah, that was wonderful, John. I think we're going to have you back on, because I can tell that you barely scratched the surface. Okay, that's a Petroglyph pun. Barely scratched the surface of what we were doing. So, can you see everybody's hands raised, John? If you can, I'll just let you field the question.
Yeah, I see them raised. Do I click on them?
Perfect. No, just call on him, just in order. Just like I think
right.
Landon's first. So yeah, just go ahead and
I'll just start at the top of my screen.
Right.
Tom Gleason.
Perfect.
Well, mine's quick. I'm just wondering, are these are the petroglyphs and everything they drew on the walls, was it all about trying to interact with the sun? Were they doing this with the light that they would see from the sun? And the other question is, how did they get up to some of these higher places? That's it. And Landon's probably got more intelligent questions.
No, those are great questions. There are tens of thousands of rock art images. We have found 6 panels that have solar interactions. So they're not, so most of them do not have a solar interaction the way we have shown them that we know of. Now, here's the problem is we go out on the solstices and equinoxes because, we have other jobs. We're not living at these sites. The truth of the matter is their primary calendar was a lunar one, and they had rituals every month of the year tied to their agricultural cycle, which means there are probably solar interactions happening on these panels, not on the solstices and equinoxes. We would never know that because we only bucket off portions of our time at those parts of the year because we know that we're going to find something based off of our research methodology. So still petroglyphs, tens of thousands of them. Some of them have solar interactions. Some of them do not. Some of them are related to the sun. Some of them are related to the moon. Many are not. Many are related to agriculture. Many are related to other religious concerns. Many of them are maps, recording of wet seasons, dry seasons. There's a whole host of data encoded in these images that go well beyond what I've shown tonight. I've just shown what our group, the Utah Cultural Astronomy Project, focuses on, recording time-lapse photography, recording these sites so that people see that sure enough, this has been happening in Utah for 1,000 to 2,000 years with this culture group. Did I answer your? How did they
get up? Because I've been to panels and I go, how did they get up there? How
they used anti-gravity from the alien interdimensional Sasquatch
that
lives there.
Okay, thank you.
Ladders and ropes. And sometimes you can see that there's actually a rock ledge. These people were about 5 feet tall on average, very short, 4 feet 10, 5 feet tall, and they were rock climbers. And so, some of the climbing they did, I would never do it. But if there's a little rock ledge, generally they can climb it. But there has been some sites where it's sheer. There's no way that they climbed a rock ledge. So they had to use ropes or ladders. All right, Landon.
Yeah, you kind of went where I was going, but these circular sun shields or sun things that you were pointing out, we see those everywhere when we go looking at this rock art. Does it always represent the sun? And you said it doesn't always have a sun orientation, or maybe it does and it's just not a solstice thing. Do some of these symbols consistently mean the same thing or are used in the same way? Because we see a lot of them in multiple places, like they're trying to communicate something.
Yeah. So look, this is a sun shield. You can tell it's a sun shield because it has solar rays coming out its circumference. So that is a common motif. There are all kinds of shields in the rock art. So clearly this is a warrior cast. But some of the, very often it's solar motifs, but sometimes it's clan motifs. So no, it doesn't have to be the sun. We've seen snapping turtle shields. We've seen owls. We've seen, so those are clan, beaver, bear. We've seen, so those are clan motifs.
Sometimes they're not on a shield though. You'll just see those circles, that kind of spiral circles.
Yeah, lots of spirals. There in Fremont rock art, you're going to run into sheep in spirals or concentric circles all the time. And one of my pet theories, again, I can't prove it, is because there's thousands of panels of rock art, and they're not going to align every panel with a sun alignment like we just watched. One of our ideas is, rather than aligning the rock art to the sun, they initiate the rock face itself with a spiral. And so that's like sort of baptizing the canvas. And that's what empowers it with the power of the sun or the moon or the cosmos. And then they do their rock art. So that would explain why there would be so many spirals in the rock art. Is it's a way to sort of prepare the rock face for the sacred images that are going to be put on. Now that's a theory, not proven. Very often the spirals do represent the sun, but very often it's like cycles in the solar year. You'll get 3-ring spirals, 4-ring spirals, 5, 7, 6, 8, 13, 12, 9. And so they're using those numbers for a reason. And I can't tell you all the reasons. Some of it's cosmology, some of it's tribal, some of it is, it took me 6 months to do my trade route and now I'm back. You know, it's impossible to decipher much of this. You would have to be in the head of the people creating it. So
do you think any of it's like scripture, that they tell a story and the tribe goes back to it and tells the story of some mythological story?
Yes. Some of it is that. In fact, there's definite panels where it's the entire cosmology of the tribe that's going on there. So they're going there, telling a story of their ancestors, telling a story of the gods and the goddesses, and the story of the history of their people. So some of it is a sort of, book of Genesis that gives the history of the people. Now, again, we don't, a good example of that is the Rochester panel in Emory County. Let's see. I can probably pull a picture of that up. Anyway. Do I have Rochester right here? There is a panel of scripture.
Oh,
This is
we're still seeing the slideshow.
I gotta. Do you see that?
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, we got to find that one.
So this too has astronomical alignments. And
Where's this?
This is in Emory County. In fact, let's see if I have any of those. So it's on this protrusion. You walk out, there's this big canyon, and there's this little peninsula of rock, and you walk down the spine of it, and it's carved right out here. And it actually has there was a pillar of rock in front of it, because you can see the nub of it, but it was broken off. And you can actually find that pillar of rock down at the bottom of the peninsula. And so a study was done where they re-erected that rock, and the shadow of that did fall on these lines, equinox and solstices. And so it did have solar interactions. There's where the pillar broke off. Oh, it's right here. There's the nub. And
what's the nearest town to this?
God, I don't know. It's out in the middle of nowhere.
Isn't Emory the only town in Emory?
Yeah, I think Emory is the only town in Emory.
I'm trying to get located.
I'm trying to. Anyway,
Can you find, are these on maps somewhere? Is there a,
no, well,
No.
you can find this just by looking up the Rochester panel, because it's well known and it's on the Emory things to see in the one town
Okay.
in Emory. So
How about a field trip?
we
Seriously.
anytime you want to do a field trip, I'd be happy to go with you. Because there's so much vandalism happening, the rock art community has stopped sharing sites, and they've asked everyone to stop sharing sites on the period, which is really frustrating for a researcher such as me, because I look at things and I need to know the location to go there, and unless I have an in with that particular group, it's very hard for me to get the location. So that's why I work with the Utah Rock Art Research Association. They generally help me find my way to the places I need to be. But when we publish papers, normally you're supposed to, in academic papers, give GPS coordinates, but we don't. You know, we provide a footnote saying we no longer do this as part of the rock art etiquette in the American Southwest because of the vandalism. And so I guess that's my plug, just to say, please don't touch, deface, shoot at rock art anywhere at any time, because it really is, it's breathtaking how bad some of these panels have gotten. In fact, during COVID, the state parks are 90% funded, by the way, with visitors, only 10% funded through taxpayers. So they have to pay 90% of their budgets by people who visit the park. And during COVID, they were afraid they were going to be shut down, but they were busier than they've ever been during COVID, because people came from outside of the state with nothing to do. And so they visited Utah state parks, and there was a swath of vandalism and garbage that followed in their wake. Just ignorance, people not knowing, they see older vandalism from decades ago and think, oh, I can carve my initials here. And so we got a whole new layer of Sally Loves Joey on our rock art panels over COVID. And so anyway, next question, Bruce.
Or actually, Luann is next up.
Luann.
Oh, thank you, Bruce. I don't care, but okay. You're talking about the change because of vandalism, but we think of the earth as changing all the time, erosion and earthquakes, plate tectonics, uppush, etc. Just how surprising is it that these particular places have stayed accurate with the sun coming to those spots?
Excellent question. The first thing we do when we find a solar interacting panel is we look at what's making the interaction. Where's the sun? What's its angle? What rock face is casting the sun shadow line? Then we have to inspect it. Has it eroded? Has it broken? Is this the same as when it was 1,000 years ago? And actually, there's a couple panels we've gone to that we are certain, well, not certain, but we're highly confident we're solar interacting, but the rock edge that did cast the shadow is broken. And so therefore, we can't record anything because it no longer interacts. But on the panels we showed you, we look at that, and we look for vandalism, erosion. If you know, and we determine
Emory
if
County
it's
is like
significantly
just below
changed
us.
from when they were there. So in the examples we gave, those have been happening for centuries. There's a couple of them like that. The last one I showed with the music, there's a nice fracture running down the slit that casts that sunlight on that panel, which tells us that in another century or two, that rock piece is going to fall out and that solar interaction will disappear. So, but yeah, that's an excellent question. And we have to look at that to see if in fact, there's one site. I don't here. I gotta stop share. Look at my just hold on. I'm going to show you a panel. Maybe if I have it, the eyeglass site. Yeah. I don't know. We've got one panel where there is a solar interaction on the petroglyphs, and they actually pecked the rock ledge that casts the shadow to make that solar interaction happen. So you can see the peck marks, and they've actually contoured the rock face to cause the sun shadow line to interact the way that it does. So that's one example where they actually transformed the shadow casting face to make the solar interaction happen. So that tells us, you know, we're not looking in vain. If they're actually modifying the rock face to make the solar interaction, then they're using this as a methodology. So in the other examples you saw tonight, that's just all from the natural rock face. All right, Bruce.
Yeah, I've just got a couple questions. Like when you took the time-lapse photography, how long do you have people out there? Do you have to position cameras in a very specific spot each time? And then are they monitored over the days or hours? How does that work to get the photography?
I've been lucky in that I've only lost one entire camera setup.
So you just leave them out there and let them go?
So like a couple of years ago, I was at this site. Can you see my screen now? This horizon viewing. This guy right here. I had my time-lapse camera set up underneath this rock spur to film the sunset. And then I was at a different location filming the sunlight on a rock face. And when I got back to this location, I saw four-wheeler treads riding up to this site, and my heart sunk because I knew someone had come to look at it. And sure enough, all my camera gear was gone. I didn't mind the camera gear so much. I lost 3 days of videography on my memory card in the camera. It was an entire summer solstice trip that they took, and that's what really made me angry. So actually, ever since that, I'm really reticent leaving my gear in a spot. A lot of these places are hard to get to or are on private land. This is on private land, so no one should be there, but especially in the vernal area, there's people that drive around looking for anything. So, you know, that's.
You could try putting on the equipment what is an Apple AirTag and see if you can track it down later.
Yeah, I've thought about that as well.
Yeah. Now, what kind of camera equipment do you use for these photographs?
I generally use a Brino time-lapse camera. It's a low resolution camera, so it's not nice, crisp, tight photography, but a Brino camera runs off 4 AA batteries, can run in any temperature, and it can run for days on the 4 AA batteries. And so I can set it out there for a day and not have to worry about it losing power. And then I get it's a 1080p by 720p video, AVI file. And I use that, but I also use GoPros. I have an Astro modified Canon RP that I also use, but I never leave that. The equipment can get expensive. So these Brino cameras are about $400 or $500 for the camera, the housing, and the tripod. And so if I lose a $500 camera, then ouch, but that's better than losing a $3,000 camera. So, but yeah, that's what we use.
Are you guys camping out there for days?
Oh man.
I mean, I imagine there's not a Marriott down the street.
Well, I'm kind of getting old and tired of camping, but let me show you a site that I camped in that actually was the game changer in our research. If I can find it.
Those photographs are beautiful. A lot of those that you take and your videos that you do too are just fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I got where is my sheep shelter shot that I can share with everyone?
It's like a tongue twister right there. My sheep shelter shot that I can share with her.
Easy now.
Here we are. All right, so I want to share my screen.
Wow.
Share screen. Where's my sheep shelter share? Okay.
Oh man.
This is a cave shelter at Fremont Indian State Park, and actually is covered in steel bars. I had to Photoshop those out. And no, I'll never do that again because that was hours of my life I'll never get back. But sadly, again, they have to close it up, otherwise it'd be vandalized. But it has these petroglyphs on the ceiling. I slept in there for 2 nights. And when I slept in there, I discovered something, and that is this wedge of sky that you see from inside. So there's the opposing bluff, the cave ceiling, and you get about a 20-degree swath of sky. And that just so happens to be the ecliptic. That's where the sun, moon, and planets move across the sky. So you literally can sit in that cave shelter and watch that band of sky, the movement of the sun, moon, and planets from within this cave. And that is amazing. And, the only way to know that is actually to sit there and watch it. And so not only that, is the way the cave is oriented, sunlight, this is a winter solstice sunrise, it only penetrates the cave a couple weeks out of the year. So it's a winter solstice viewing shrine, as well as the southern sky viewing shrine. And so I don't know, why did I bring that up? There was a question.
Were you camping out there?
Oh yeah, I was camping. So I was camping in here. They let me sleep in there overnight. So yeah, there are sites where I camp overnight. It's kind of, you kind of have to do that because I am generally at these sites before dawn. So I got to be there at about 4:30 a.m. I mean, in the summer, dawn's at 6 a.m. So I got to be set up by then. And it's, if it takes me 45 minutes to an hour and a half to get there, then I'm committed. I just go there that night, set up, take night shots, and stay up through the night, listen to the coyotes. Hopefully they don't eat me. And then I take photos in the morning for the sunrise shots. So yeah, that does happen.
Is that I-70 right there, looking at those two roads?
It is I-70.
Wow,
Yep.
that is unreal.
Yep.
Those that have passed through there. Wow.
That's how they discovered Five Finger Ridge, by the way.
Yeah.
1984, they were building I-70 and they were bulldozing the village hill and kept running into archaeology. So they stopped. And the archaeologists came down, did it like a 60 or 90 day fast excavation, and then they bulldozed the hill. So most of the Fremont village is actually underneath I-70.
Would never, and John, that would never happen today. They would.
Oh,
never,
no. That created
5 fingers. They took
Yeah.
4, right? They took
Yeah.
4 and left 1.
Yes.
That's consistent with what happened in the country.
Yes.
Wow,
But
that's an unreal.
that created such an uproar that the rules have all changed. That would never happen again.
Oh.
All right, who are we with next? Douglas, Maine.
Yeah, I wanted to add to Landon's question about the spiral figures. They're found in lots of different cultures. Like I saw them in Ireland at the New Grange and in Peru, the Andean Cross. So is it common for like in the Fremont culture, is it common in other cultures where the sun interacts with the spiral, or is it just more generally like some other symbolism for the spiral?
Worldwide phenomenon. So, the oldest surviving passage tomb is in Ireland. That's Cairntee, Loughcrew, Ireland. It has a equinox alignment. The sunrise or sunset, I can't remember. I think it's the sunrise, goes right down the entry passage into the back of the tomb. And if you walk down that passage tomb, it is filled with petroglyphs on either side. And, it looks just like Fremont rock art. There's spirals, and there's dots, and there's counting dots. I mean, you walk down and I'm like, wow, that just looks like I'm in the American Southwest. But you can find similar patterns throughout Europe in the rock art, in Africa in the rock art, Australia in the rock art. So, we can either theorize that everyone was dispersing after Noah's flood, or we can theorize that the oral mind has a set of templates that they analogize with nature in their rock art, and that is reproduced the world over with cultures that produce the rock art. So yes, the spirals, the concentric circles, the anthropomorphic figures. I mean, there's variations in different cultures, but also an incredible amount of homogeneity. Good question. iPhone Jackie Matthews.
Yes, is that me?
Yes.
I'm very serious. I would just die and go to heaven to have a field trip with you. I'd just like to throw that out there for people. But I just would love to see it face to face and hear you explain it.
Talk to Rebecca and Landon. Maybe they can drum something up.
Yeah, that's so like I'm throwing that out and then let those guys run with it, but I'd sure be interested.
Can you ATV into this stuff?
Fremont Indian State Park is actually the largest ATV park in the country. It has 1,000 miles.
We've been there. Yeah, we've ridden into that. But what about like Emory and stuff?
Yes, some of it you can ATV into. Some of it, I mean, actually, a lot of the sites we look at are not that far from a dirt road. So we just drive our trucks there and then hike our camera gear 10 minutes from the dirt road. Sometimes it's actually not that easy. And there's a couple sites I've been to that I'm like, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah, New Mexico has a lot of those.
So it's, but a lot of the sites you saw tonight are fairly easily accessible. So, Talia, good evening. I'm not getting sound. You're muted. Hello?
John,
Talia,
can you hear?
I can hear you. Oh, no, you're muted. Unmute.
Oh,
There
hi.
you go.
There we
Hi.
go. Ah,
Good
my,
evening.
my microphone needs a spanking. So you sort of touched on my question here a couple of minutes ago with somebody else's. I think it was Douglas's. Anyways, you and I've had these kind of conversations a few times before, and as I'm watching this, I'm thinking about this use of the equinox and the solstices around the world between cultures that are disparate. There's no communications between them. We know that. And we know there were no aliens jumping around the world. But I'm thinking about, particularly as you were pointing out some of these solar alignments at the equinox. Somebody just sent me a video they had taken at Edfu Temple at the vernal equinox a couple of weeks ago. And what I'm really wondering, and you did touch on this, by the way, congratulations, your photography is wonderful.
Thanks, Dad.
And it always is. And I know you've just come back from Mexico, so you've been around the world and looked at a lot of this. What I'm wondering is, are we observing some type of a archetype of the collective unconscious in human depth psychology, that we do this around the world? This is way too prevalent to have happened by coincidence.
Yeah, this is so the way I would put that is it's deeply embedded in the human psyche. Cultures without writing have their primary referent of meaning is what they observe in nature. And so they have a fantastic awareness of natural cycles, including solar lunar cycles. But it's not just that. When the sun rises at a specific point on the horizon, certain birds fly into the canyon, certain animals migrate into the canyon, certain winds show up during the season. This is when you plant, this is when you harvest, this is when you germinate your seeds. They tie all this to the rising, setting sun, moon, and stars. And so this is largely astrological thinking, which is oral thinking. When a certain star rises on the horizon and your seed blooms, oral peoples believe that rising star causes that seed to bloom. And so they connect the two, and suddenly they are linking heaven-earth relationships from the sky to the earth, from the earth to the sky. And again, this happens all throughout history. As far as we can tell, it's happening where there's agriculture and orality. This is how oral peoples operate. So these alignments with the sun, with the moon, that's what they're doing. They're cosmicizing their agricultural cycle. They're cosmicizing their cultural cycle. And they have a deep awareness of those cycles. And so they're bringing, to us, a sacred text is a sacred text. To them, the sacred text was the sky. This is what brought divine powers to the earth. And so you're going to bring the numinous into your life, into your culture, into your village, into your city state by making these alignments. That is the sacred. And so, that oral peoples think cosmologically and literate peoples do not. We think historically. So For oral peoples, truth is cosmic fact. For literate peoples, truth is historic fact. And there's a huge difference. So when you read your Bible, the people who originated those stories, truth to them was cosmic fact. We are now reading it as historic fact. There's a huge chasm between those epistemologies, and a lot of confusion as a result. Good question.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Bruce.
I just had a quick observation. I'm wondering if you took the doodlings of a bored kid, making doodles on a paper and stuff across the world, if you wouldn't find similar kind of shapes, and you're just drawing and things that might be kind of coded in us. The spiral is kind of a fascinating little, continuous line going around itself. I'm sure stars and dots, and I'm wondering how much that might just be encoded in our way that we see the world.
I again, I agree. It's part of this archetype of the psyche that's embedded in oral consciousness. I agree. There's actually a book about cave art. This is Neolithic cave art. There's like 40 repeated symbols across cultures, spanning between 30,000 BCE and 10,000 BCE. Clearly, these cultures are not in contact with each other, and yet the symbols keep reappearing over tens of thousands of years. And so it is something primal in our psyche that will keep producing this and relating it.
Phallic symbols on old cave art and phallic symbols on bathroom walls, are kind of a universal thing.
Well, the penis and vagina will never go away, but in rock art societies, this is how you demonstrate. This is how you illustrated the fertility cycle. You drew a phallus, you drew a vulva, so yeah, that and the vulva and the phallus are generally drawn pretty much the same way in every culture. I mean, the vulva is often a triangle or a circle, and the phallus is a stick. So it's really not hard to look at those and come up with basic shapes. Rebecca.
Yeah, I just had a question. Landon and Tom and I have gone out looking at a lot of these things, and there's one symbol. How would you describe it, Landon or Tom? It kind of looks like a power line. Can you describe it better, Landon or Tom?
Yeah.
We see it over and over, and we're just really curious. It looks like a...
Which line are you talking about?
It's Landon. It looks like where a power line would connect. It's like a triangle. Landon, can you describe it? Landon, can you unmute and describe it?
Yeah, the one I'm thinking of is the ones we see down by the Paiute Trail, that the power lines they've got like the headdress that looks just like the headdress. So if you look at the power lines down right by Fremont State Park, they all have this sticking up and
kind of
it almost looks like a buffalo head, and then it comes down. But the power lines look very much like the
like a transformer
dryer that you see all the time.
Yeah,
it's almost like they made the power line look like
the power line is in the headdress, or
not the power pole. The power pole, the big high voltage steel thing.
Like a transformer station kind of. But
yeah, they look very much like the rock art headdress that you see with the big square head and the pointy things.
We'll have to get the whiteboard out, Bruce. No.
Yeah.
I'll send you a picture of what we mean. But yeah, we see that all over and we're like, interesting. Of course, our answer is always aliens, right?
Yeah.
Well,
oh, that's crazy. Do we have any more questions for John? I know we probably have a million questions. I feel like we're just going to have you back, John, because this is absolutely fascinating. How
field trip. Field trip.
Yeah, we're definitely going to plan something. How can people access your site or information about what you're doing? We'll include links, but is there anything you'd like to just say that you could tell us? Oh, go here, or
Just johnklundwall.com is my website. I haven't updated it in a while because I've been very busy, but I did just get back from Chichen Itza. I went down there to film the equinox interaction. And of course, it was cloudy the day I was there, so I missed that. But by the way, this happens to me a lot. I plan a trip, and I'm just these interactions, by the way, on these rock art panels generally don't happen like a single moment or a single day. They happen over days. The tightest interaction is 7 days, but some of them will happen over weeks, and it turns out you want that for 2 reasons. One, it's cloudy every other day, and so if you had an interaction that lasted 1 day and it was cloudy, oh well, see you next year, right? So you don't want that. 2, their primary calendar is a lunar one, and so when the solar interaction starts happening on the rock face, what these cultures tend to do is say, okay, on the next new moon, on the next full moon, we're going to perform our ritual. And so they're integrating the lunar and solar calendars in that way. But the next new or full moon might be a week away. And so you need lead up time for that to happen. And so these interactions, therefore, generally take several days, which is good for me because if I plan a trip and I look at the weather, if I have a couple cloudy days and a couple sunny days, I'll say, okay, I'm still going to go. But it's Utah, and very often I go out and it's supposed to be mostly sunny, and I end up having clouds or the horizon full of clouds, and there you go. I'm left just photographing rock art without the solar interaction.
Are there any events coming up that are in the North American region that we could attend together or try to? Utah, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, good grief. There's any events as in
interactions, or where you have the petroglyphs, the panels. Anything else? I mean, I don't know. This
summer solstice, I'm sure we'll be at a site filming. But there's a couple panels right here in Fremont Indian State Park that you could watch. I just released a video of that fertility shrine in the Uinta Basin, and I am working on a video for Fremont Indian State Park. They take so much of my time, and I don't get paid for them, so it's it's a labor of love. But eventually that'll be released, and maybe the park will even use it in their museum, and so then you can see how these work. Otherwise, we could go down in May or June sometime on a field trip and watch them happen.
Well, I'll put a plug in. I'll put a plug in just for the Fremont Visitor Center there by I-70. If anybody's never been there, I had never been there since when was it? Landon 2 years ago. We've all driven by there, going to Green River, took it for granted. 5 fingers, what? Wait, 1 finger? And this happened? When? In our lifetime?
Yeah.
They took the mountain away to build the road. No, it's an unbelievable realization what happened there. Everything that was taken away. And what's left there is still fascinating, all the panels and everything. But this stuff is right here. I just have to put the plug in.
I'm plug away.
Go. I think we'll try to plan something. We'll do it. We'll Please. Connect and talk. I think that would be amazing.
It's awesome, John. Thank you.
Yeah,
it's been absolutely amazing.
You just caught me, man. I would just die and go to heaven to be taught by you, John.
Yeah, this has been absolutely amazing. We've tapped into an incredible resource here at Book Club, and we're going to use you again, John, because this is
You
right
bet.
up our alley. Our whole mission statement is just learning and exploring everything. So this is absolutely fascinating and connecting, I think, to the wider world, which just this does. You know, you feel like this sense of awe and wonder and this incredible spirituality when you look at all these things, and it's just amazing. So all right, I guess we will officially conclude. Dang it, I don't want to. I want to keep talking, but let's put our final slides up really quick, if we have those, just as we end. And then I will definitely go on record saying we're going to figure out a field trip. So we want to remind everybody that you can go to the Good Book Club podcast for audio of all of these kind of episodes, like our one tonight. So if you want to listen to other Lazy Learners events that we've had, they're on podcast. And you can also find us on YouTube. You have to search the Good Book Club for Post-Mormons, and then it'll come right up. And all of our regular book club episodes and these bonus events, these Lazy Learner events, are on that too. So if you would like to remind everybody, of course, Sunday is our regular book club meeting, and that's going to be Recovering Agency with Luna Lindsay Corbden, and Luna is going to be with us for the entire book club. She just told me today she's coming to the whole thing. So woo! I know it's going to be really, really exciting. So this is going to be amazing. And if anybody wants more information on the book club, you can find us on Facebook or Instagram, or you can send me an email at thegoodbookclub@mail.com and get connected, because we really just love to learn, and we try to have a lot of interesting guests, like just connecting with John, you know, so randomly, such a random way that we connected, but we find these incredible people and we put them to work, right? And we say, come to a presentation or take us on a field trip. So I think this is great. So thank you, everybody. We'll say goodbye for now from the Good Book Club. Thank you.